Right. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us here at our first virtual Teen Book Fest. We're so excited to see everyone at these sessions. We're excited to have these authors join us. And looking forward to some good questions from the audience. So please, as we're chatting with these authors, if you think of a question, go ahead and throw it into the chat and we will feed those questions to the authors and get some really great discussions going here, hopefully. My name is Pamela Edholm. I am a middle school librarian in the Buffalo area. And I have the pleasure of introducing our authors today. So we have with us today Rachelle Delaney. She's the author of 8 novels for young readers, including the Metro Dogs of Moscow, which was a CLA Book of the Year honor book. Her newest novel is Alice Fleck's Recipes for Disaster. She has an MFA in creative writing from the University of British Columbia and lives in Vancouver with her human partner and animal friends. Welcome, Rachelle. Thanks for being with us. And also we have Paul Griffin. What has Paul not done with his life? After earning his BA in film studies, he went on to work as a butler, bartender, cook, EMT, dog trainer, construction worker, and tutor. He's even washed dishes with Vin Diesel, and he's written many books for middle grade and young adults, ranging from the adventurous to emotional tales. He works with organizations like Literacy for Incarcerated Teens and Behind the Book, and loves seeing young people realize their dreams. He lives in New York City with his humans and animals, I believe, right? You have animals too, Paul?
Oh, yeah. But see,
thanks for joining us.
This is what happens when you get old. Just means you're old when you've done a lot of stuff. That's all.
You've just done a lot of interesting stuff. And then we also have with us today, Diana Ma. She's a Chinese-American author that believes in the importance of writing books that feature powerful Asian-American heroines. She hungered for these books as a child and wants to make sure future generations can find themselves reflected in such stories. She has a BA in creative writing from the University of Washington and an MA in English creative writing from the University of Illinois, Chicago. She's coming to us from Seattle today, where she teaches composition, creative writing, and literature at North Seattle College. Welcome, Diana. And then our final panelist here we have James Ponti, who was born in Italy and raised in Florida. He went to college in California. Gosh, you've been everywhere, haven't you? He received a degree in screenwriting from the USC Film School and went on to write and produce television shows for Nickelodeon, the Disney Channel, PBS, Spike TV, the History Channel, and the Golf Channel. He loves writing, traveling, and the Boston Red Sox, and lives with his humans in Florida. Thanks for joining us, James.
And my dog. My dog will probably make you share.
And his dog.
Lucy, that's her name.
Lucy.
And the only school she didn't mention was Paul, who was an Ivy League school. I guess he's so pronounced and skilled, we don't have to list it. But
no, it was athletics. Athletics, not my brain.
Yeah.
Very nice. Okay, so I'm Wendy Sardell. I'm the facilitator here, and we've got several other people working to make this flow smoothly. I wanted to start with some reminders, some housekeeping reminders. I guess that's what they call them. This session is being recorded, and we're asking people, the participants, to stay muted and stay off video so that we don't crash or freeze up. We are looking to have a lot of really good questions from you, and you can put those in the chat and they will filter them up through to me, I guess. And when the session is done, don't forget to visit the webpage for other additional opportunities and for some shopping and that kind of thing. So let's get started. And I'm going to be looking in the far distance at the moment because I've got a second screen with some of the questions that we have here. So what I wanted to start with actually was I'm a middle school librarian. And so I know this group is a much different group than what we see in elementary and middle school. And I kind of wanted to start with these middle schoolers are changing rapidly. Some of them are, you know, they have a lot of different sensibilities. And what drew you to writing for this particular group, and who do you think you're speaking to most with this group? Do you think that you're speaking to the librarians, to the parents, to the kids, and how do you hook them? So I think that's a lot, but we could start with that. Somebody would like to.
I think Rachelle really wants
digest
to answer that right off the bat. I think that was her dream.
What was that?
I think Rachelle was dying to answer first.
Oh, I was dying to answer first. You're right. You can just tell. Okay. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to remember the parts of the question.
So just, you know, why middle school and
yeah,
you know,
okay.
how.
Yeah. So I mean, I absolutely love middle grade novels. It's definitely by far my favorite thing to read. And I guess one of the things that I love about it is how much you can do with a middle grade novel. So for me, it's incorporating things like adventure and mystery and humor and relationships. I just find that there's so much like rich territory to explore. And I feel like middle grade readers are up for a lot. They're up for complex characters and complex relationships, and knowing that people aren't always all good or all bad. So there's a lot of depth, I think, that you can get into. I personally really love middle grade novels that are funny. So I really appreciate that level of humor. That's something that I'm a big fan of. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
I think that is a lot of the same appeal that it has for me. I started in children's television. I worked at Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, and so I was already writing for this age group, and I think it was a natural fit for me. I love the way middle grade readers love the books that they read. As far as who are we writing to, I am writing to them. I'm not writing to parents. I'm not writing to librarians. A lot of librarians and parents read the books and like it. A lot of adults. I would hazard a guess that as much as 25 to 30% of the readership of the books that I have are adults that read the books either with their kids or just like to read them. But I think it is an incredibly rich readership that, like she said, what Rachelle said, they're up for complex stories. They're up for, you know, stories that challenge them on what's important in the world. But I really hold dear and special the fact that these books are some of the first places they explore different ideas. And the role that we play as authors in that part of the equation. You know, we're having this conversation that's one-sided. I'm going to say everything I have to say all at once, and you're going to read it away from me and hear it all. That, you know, it's really important, you know, that what we get to share with them, and I just think it's a real honor to get to write for that group. I can't imagine writing primarily for any other group. Now, Diana, you're newish to middle grade, is that right?
Not newish, completely new.
Completely new. So what is it that's drawing you to that though? Why do you want to do that?
So I'm new as an author just in general, but especially middle grade. But the first, my debut novel was just published, and it is a heiress apparently, and it is, yes, it's a young adult romantic comedy. So I have an 11-year-old boy and a 7-year-old boy. And at the time that Heiress apparently came out, they were 10 and 6. And my assumption was that they would not be interested in reading Heiress apparently. And they even, my youngest one, he's just gotten the concept that I've written a book before my older son was trying to explain, Mom made a book. And he assumed I had put together a book, like drawn the pictures and did the binding somehow. But so my eldest had to explain exactly what went into it. And then he said to me, well, why don't you write a book for me? And I thought, that's great. I will do that. And I've got an 11-year-old who would probably be into reading a middle grade book. And he has started to become this really big reader. And he actually read Eris apparently and loved it. But I wanted to write something with him in mind, with both of them in mind. So I started writing middle grade, and I've always been fascinated by fantasy and fairy tale retelling. So I wrote a fantasy fairy tale retelling that is set in a magic school, and I'm still working on that. That's my work in progress. But I'm getting, it's great because I have an in-house reader and he reads fast and he gives me fantastic feedback. So he read my first draft of the middle grade fantasy, and he said, you know, in one of these scenes where the adults show up, I won't give away too much, he said and I don't even know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but he said, that's a deus ex machina. And he used it correctly. And I was like, you're right. I got lazy there. I did not know how to end that chapter. And so the hand of God came in and fixed things. And then, but one of the feedback I'm getting from critique partners is, your characters sound too adult. This doesn't sound like kids. And I'm realizing it's my 11-year-old's fault. I'm writing the words he would use, the things he would say, and it apparently doesn't seem realistic for middle grade. So I'm working on that. And I actually have a book coming out, which I can't say much about, but it's through, I'm writing a book for Houghton Mifflin Harcourt that is a middle grade as well. So I've suddenly transitioned to the middle grade, and I'm not really quite sure how that happened.
Paul?
For me, how did I end up writing middle grade? I don't know. I feel stuck here. I mean, I hate kids. I hate them. So I don't know. I don't know why I'm here. I couldn't sell adult books, to the big people. I think it's because middle grade, that's when you're that age, that's when the firsts happen, right? That's when the great shocks in life, first love, or maybe somebody passes away. You might even lose a friend your own age. I just remember that being a time when the shocks just kept coming, both good and bad. And I guess I go back to it because it just makes me feel connected to the idea that every day something pretty amazing can happen if you just keep an open mind. So it's just a good place for me to be mentally. And I think visiting with middle grade kids is really awesome.
It's amazing.
The kids they're brilliant. They're so wise. They're in that stage where I don't want to use the word innocent. I think they're open-hearted, and they're not afraid to tell you that they're afraid, and they're not afraid to tell you that they're blown away. So being around that kind of energy it keeps you hopeful.
One thing I noticed about writing middle grade, and I've certainly have over the last 8 years or so developed a lot of really great friendships with other middle grade authors, is that all of us kind of, like most people, middle grade was not our favorite time in our past history. Mm-hmm. It was, there's this like weird traffic jam that happens where everyone's all together in elementary school and everyone's on separate paths in high school, and middle grade is kind of that road where the roads start diverging and it takes a while to find your lane. And I feel like a lot of what we write are maps, like here's the map for survival in middle grade. And we're not going to call it that. And we're going to have fun adventure. Like Rachelle said, adults won't pick up a book called adventure because they feel, but kids want adventure, and it's so much fun. The movie that, I went to film school, the movie that imprinted on me the most as a kid was Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was just something about everything about that. And the book versions of that sensibility, they're just the richest area for that is in middle grade. And I love writing.
You've kind of touched on a lot of things there, and it kind of so you actually kind of touched on what my next question was. Do you have any middle school experiences that shaped your writing?
Mm.
And as for somebody who spent 25 years in middle school, I agree with everything you're saying here.
So, I'll do a positive. There's so much negative in middle school. And I had a really happy childhood, and I had a really, there were family things that were hard, and there were money things that were hard, and it was not an easy childhood, but it was mostly good. But I was socially so insecure and not able to find my place and not able to do whatever, and just didn't know where I would fit in. And they had the middle grade when I was growing up was 7th, 8th, and 9th in Florida. So the end of 8th grade, and 8th grade was by far the worst year for me for everything. It was time for the student council elections for the next year. And the vice principal, she came up to me and she goes, "James, have you thought about running for anything for student council?" And I thought, well, maybe, maybe like parliamentarian. There were these weird things that you could run for that weren't real things. Like, I don't know what the parliamentarian of the 9th grade student council is supposed to do. And she goes, "Well, why don't you run for president?" And I'm like, are you drunk at school? I mean, why would I run for president? It's going to be either this one girl who was the captain of the cheerleading, literally the captain of the cheerleading team, or this other girl who was everyone's favorite. And she goes, "Well, why don't you just run anyway?" And so I thought, okay, I'll do this. I'll do that. And then I realized I had to give a speech in front of the whole school. And this is not going to go well. And I thought, they don't even know my name. So I thought, you know what? Why don't I just tell jokes? And I got up and I did a speech that was all jokes about, you don't know my name. My name is, blah, blah, blah. And you should vote for me because I'm a cheerleader. You should vote for me because I do this and that and that. And I went up there and I did 3 minutes that changed my life. And a week later, I was the president of the student council of my school, even though I was this obscure kid. And that moment of accidental self-belief is something I try to write about. It's like, for kids, it's just like, some of these things are reachable. I thought it was it was almost a joke for me to do it. And to do it was just like, oh wait, there's no magic skill to this. Everyone's just as insecure. Everyone's just as, so that part probably shaped me a lot.
So one of the reasons I never thought I would write middle grade is because middle school was excruciating.
Yes.
I think it was for many of us, but it was a terrible time when I didn't feel like I fit in, and I was very awkward, very shy, and but what I have found once I started to dive in is that all of those stories that when I experienced them and lived them at the time were so awkward and horrible, make for great middle grade fiction. That awkwardness, and I'm realizing that as I'm using my experiences, they kind of lose the pain a little and become funny. I mean, and so it's a transformation. I'm realizing, oh, I have a million awkward stories. This chapter is going to go by so quickly. And I just used one of the stories in a scene, and it was a story that I didn't actually remember happening to me. So it was in 7th grade, and then so it had been years, and then sometime in college, I heard from a friend that they had run into someone I knew in middle school. And he had told my friend, "Oh, Diana is so nice, but I said this horrible thing to her in middle school, and I've always regretted it. And I thought, what was that thing? Because I actually had positive associations with this guy. Like, he wasn't one of the bullies. He wasn't one of those people that I thought was mean to me in middle school or in high school. So I thought, what is it that he's been holding all those years? And then at our high school, our 10-year high school reunion, he was there. So I went up to him, and I'm going to use a fake name so I don't embarrass him. Let's call him Sam. That's not his name. So I said, Sam, so I heard from a friend, a mutual friend, that you said something mean to me in middle school. Do you remember what it was? I've been curious to know what it was. And he turned red, and he just like looked down on the ground. He's like, I remember. And I was like, well, tell me. And he said, I don't know why I did it. And he's like, in 7th grade science class, we were getting our locker assignments, and I just yelled out, pick your locker partners quick or you'll get Diana Ma as a locker partner. And I was thinking, that's not even the worst thing that happened to me. I've completely forgotten that, but it's a good story. So I included it in the middle grade novel I'm writing, without all the stuff about how bad he felt about it, but just as like a casual thing that happened in middle school.
I'll go. Yeah, this is so interesting. I love this chat. So when I think about things that influenced my middle grade, the thing that pops to mind the most is changes in friendship. I feel like it's that time for like groups to shift, and like the friend that you thought you would be friends with forever is suddenly not your friend anymore. And I think, to me, that moment of change, like having to let go of certain relationships and be open to finding new ones, and then that kind of transformation into like, oh, I found a new friendship that is equally as like nourishing as the last one. I think that, to me, I mean, happens so many times. Yeah, I'm thinking now, like, how did I get through middle school? There were so many changes and just so much going on. But I also think about the same thing was happening at home with my sister. So like watching, your sibling go through so many changes, and like the sibling dynamics as you're growing up, I guess. Yeah, so changes in relationships for me is central to my writing.
I think the big thing for me at that age was my grandfather. My grandparents lived around the corner, and my grandfather used to say, "Hey, live for the day," and it was just something he said. And then my grandmother died, and my grandfather had a stroke a couple of years before, so I moved in to take care of him. He couldn't cook for himself, and he couldn't really talk. And one day I came home, and a neighbor was there, and I knew something was up, and she said, "Now your grandfather's in the hospital. He's going to be okay." What had happened is it was in the middle of winter. He took off his coat and he just went running in the street. I think I knew that he wanted to die a few weeks before, because I heard him. I went into the bedroom and I didn't see him there, but I heard something in the house. And I went into the living room, and he was sitting in the dark holding a picture of my grandmother and looking at it by candlelight. You could just see the tears coming down. So that all of that was sad, but it made sense, right? Because old people pass away. But shortly after that, a friend of mine, we used to meet on the corner every day after school, and we'd race. And this kid was super fast. He was so fast, he used to smoke this is my neighborhood, like 11 years old, kid smoking. He would smoke while he was running just to show me how slow I was, you know? And he always beat me by a mile. And then one day I caught up to him, and the next day he wasn't there. And I thought, oh, he probably was sick. He caught the flu or something like that. A few days later, he had died. He had this horrible form of leukemia, like rapid onset leukemia. And I think that was different because he was my age, you know, and that whole thing that my grandfather used to say, live for the day, it just came ringing back. It's a strange thing to when that happens, as it happens to all of us, right? It's weird because your life is different. That's a marker in your life when you realize that you're mortal, you know? So I think that has definitely, that comes back, that idea of mortality, kids realizing that, you know, they're mortal. And this goes to what James was saying right in the beginning about how, you know, having respect for the kids, right? For our readers. You know, we if we're lucky, we have these editors, these angels, right? Who say, no, you can go into that. Yeah, that's dark, that's sad. But you know, like, show respect for the kids, for what they're going through, for their, you know, for what they're experiencing now. It's okay to talk about the things that are tough and beautiful and joyous. So I think those markers in life, a lot of those happen in those years, like that, you know, 5th, 6th, 7th grade. Those were when I feel like that's when you have these shifts, like Rachelle was saying, shifts in the way you see friendship, right? Like some people you're meant to be friends with for a while, and that it's sad that friendship can't last. But yeah, so transformations, I guess those transformative experiences, those tend to leak into whatever story I'm working on.
I just had an aha moment, like, well, as I often do when Paul talks. But there's a thing that I have a group of middle grade authors. We get together every week on Zoom, and we just kind of, and our biggest complaint is, and we joke about it because we're all doing fine, or so, our celebrity authors. I hate when I'll read, you know, basketball player X signed a 3-book deal to do picture books, or middle, you know, or this actor who hasn't been in a movie now needs something else, is writing a middle grade mystery thing. And part of me hates that because what's happening is they're taking up space of people who have really worked hard to be authors on the you know, that shelf space is gone. But the part that I think really bothers me is, I don't know that I think they have the respect for our readers that we have. I think they're moonlighting in, and we're just going to write something just for kids, so it doesn't matter, you know. And it really does matter because, like Paul's saying, these kids want to read about these things in life that are real and that treat them as worthy of the discussion.
I think that's absolutely true. You always have to ask a kid what they're looking for with teen, what they're looking for. Are they looking to cry? Are they looking to laugh? But they know when they're being talked down to. So my follow-up question with that is, how do parents react to your book? Do you get a lot of feedback from them? Pushback if you include things, or are they big fans? Or criticisms?
I can tell a real quick one. I had written a book, you know, that just seemed like a, you know, regular dramatic story about a kid who finds a family a little bit later in life, and his mother dies, and I got a review from a reader who said, I was so glad when that dyke died, because this guy has an agenda and he is trying to, I can't remember the exact words. It was just really stunning that an adult would write something so so horrible, you know, to be so, I don't know. I don't know where that comes from, except to say that it's just a very sad place. I mean, I know that James and Diana and Rochelle, I'm hoping I'm sure you all have good stories about reactions from the adults, but that one stuck in my mind about how, wow, I wish that person were as mature as a middle grade kid, you know? Yeah. Or as open-hearted anyway, you know?
I get pretty good feedback from parents, pretty positive. A lot of, especially I think during COVID, a lot of families have read books aloud together. And, and I get parents saying that, I found myself after the kids went to bed still reading, which is great, because I like the idea that the books are open. I have gotten some angry emails, which is hard considering that I really don't, I write humorous action, adventure, mystery. There's not a lot of cutting edge topics that, I had this one parent told me that she did read aloud with her son and I tricked her into cussing. And I literally, my wife and I spent an hour trying to find a curse word in the book. We couldn't imagine what word it was. And she wrote me, she goes, he wants to read the next one, but I need to know if this verbal vomit continues. And I wrote back and I said, please don't read these books, and because if your son has problems, I finally figured out what she thought was the dirty word, which, I said someone was badass, and I made her say ass in front of her son, and he wouldn't stop saying it. That was the thing. And I wanted to say, well, the reaction there is maybe the telling part, but I said, if that's troubling to you, I would think that the issues of death and separation and the violence and the other elements of this book are far more troubling for someone who's not able to hear that word yet. So, you do get some, and I am really careful to be positive. And the reason I try to be positive is I assume a lot of these books got to kids by way of their librarian. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to tell off a parent in a rude way that makes me feel happy for a moment and then makes life even more difficult for the librarian the next day. So you just kind of have to weather that through. But you are writing knowing that everyone's reading it, but you're still writing for the kids. Yeah.
I'll go. I find parents are pretty positive about my books. I do remember though the first 3 books that I wrote, it was a series about pirate children in their own ship, and I had a few parents contact me because the pirates' language was a little harsh apparently, but they were pirates. I mean, come on. But I think that was the only, it sticks out in my mind. I mean, I try not to read like my Goodreads reviews or anything. So that was the only direct parent feedback that I can think of right now.
At some point, I want to ask you how you were able to quit Goodreads, because I would really love to know that strategy. But since I don't have a middle grade book out yet, I don't have parent responses, but I will say, as a parent myself of a middle grade reader, I think that middle grade readers are constantly underestimated by what they're looking for, what they want to read, what they can handle. And I know that when I was a middle grader, I felt my parents were constantly underestimating what I can handle. But they censored my movie watching and my television show watching. But I read so much, and I had my own library card, that they couldn't possibly keep track of what I was reading. So, and they're also immigrant. English is not their first language, so they weren't familiar with a lot of the books I was reading. So I do remember there was one time when we went to a garage sale and they just basically let me go nuts on the books. And I think I was 11 or 12. And there was this book of Harlequin romances. And I was like, oh, great. I didn't know what they were. So I got this like huge book of Harlequin romances. And a teacher called my parents because I took my books to school and I would read them. And they were like, Diana might be reading something inappropriate.
That's awesome.
So my mother actually for the first time did take a book away from me, and she was not wrong. I was a little shocked by what I found in the covers of those Harlequin romances at that age. But there was a story I want to tell about I tell so many stories about my eldest because he's just right at that age. So I was, for Eris Apparently, which is a young adult, I was doing a first chapter read, and it was going to be recorded and disseminated. And what they told me ahead of time was, so this is going to be a family friendly, we're going to be in schools and stuff. So if there's anything, if there's any profanity or swear words, we just want you to edit it out. And like James, I'm thinking, oh yeah, there's nothing here in the first chapter. And then as I'm reading it, I'm realizing at some point I say something along the lines of, I'm going to kick your ass. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to kick your butt. And so I'm editing on the fly. So I tell my son, my eldest, my 11-year-old this, and he's like, why don't you just have a disclaimer at the beginning that says some content is not appropriate for, some content is only appropriate for mature audiences or something like that. And I was just like, that's actually a great idea. And I don't censor his reading because I trust that he will know what he's ready for. Mm-hmm. And if there's something, and I've talked to him about that, and say, if there's something that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you wait and read that until you're later, but that's up to you. You can make that decision.
Nice, thank you. I have a question from the participants. They would like to know what your favorite memory of your school days was. You can take that whatever direction you would like.
I can start. I automatically think of field trips and getting out of school. So those were my favorite memories. And so I grew up in Edmonton, which is in Alberta in Canada. So just a few hours really away from the Rocky Mountains. And every year instead of middle school, we had junior high school, but pretty well the same thing. We would go to the mountains on a ski trip. And for a kid who's like, I guess 12, 13, 14 years old, to go on a couple day trips with like all of your classmates, all of your friends, to stay in a hotel and go skiing with your friends was absolutely like the best part of the year. And so many stories came out of it. And it was, it was like the biggest adventure. Again, I think that's probably why it was like the big adventure of the year for us. So that's what I think of. Junior high ski trips.
I have one that's I guess it's fairly mundane, but it does stick out as being kind of a magical thing. It was in the winter, and I was staying at my grandmother's house, which is on the border of Brooklyn and Queens. And the elevated subway train runs right along the border. And my grandmother said, go pick up the pizza down at the end of the block. And it was late. It was night. It was already dark, and the snow was falling, and it was falling so fast that the cars weren't moving. And I just had this sense of that I was in this magic moment with this beautiful, really heavy snow coming down, the train rumbling overhead, and walking back up the block for the pizza, and I was the only living thing that I could see on the block, you know, and it just felt like one of those things that can't be real. It was just I just remember that being very peaceful moment at those times, and I do treasure that peacefulness.
Yeah.
We had a 5-minute warning about a minute ago, so we're down to about 4 minutes left. This has been such a fascinating discussion.
I'm so fast. Wow.
And
Yeah.
again, fast.
I had a moment that I don't know if it stands out for me as a key moment and kind of informs what I write, which was, so I never knew my father. He was gone by the time I was 2. But I had that last name, and my mom got remarried. And so when I went to first grade, I was James Ponti. But a lot of people called me by my stepfather's last name, and they pulled me aside and they said, you know, you keep going by different name. What name do you want to be called? And I thought this was kind of a heavy thing to lay on a 7-year-old, by the way. But it's like, what name? And I said, well, I would like to change names every year. And they said, well, I like on all the odd numbered years to be Ponti, and all the other, that way I can pay respect to my father, but also give myself, you know. And they said, no, you have to pick one or the other. And so I picked my stepfather's name. And that's what I was from 2nd grade until forever. And then, and he was not a bad guy, but he did not imprint a lot, and he was out of the picture too. By the time in 8th grade, he was gone. And even though we lived in the same small town, we had, I never saw him, right? So he had it was over. And my brothers had a different father, so they had a different last name. And I remember towards the end of the last year of middle school, we had this big awards ceremony, and you get to have awards. And I will probably win at least one of these, right? I might win one of these. And our little school, our little town, the newspaper will write about that. They covered everything that happened at the schools. And I go, and if I win something, it'll be this name of this guy who I'm not even part of my life. And at work, everyone will come up to him and say, oh, I saw he won, and he'll take credit for this, right? And this is a lot now for a 13-year-old to go through. And I walked into the principal's office, and I don't know where this strength or this conviction came from. I just walked in and I said, Mr. Davis, if you get my school records, you'll see my legal name is James Ponti. That's all I want to be called from now on. And I remember thinking to myself, because I had moved here from another country, my brothers had a different last name, my mom had the married name, I was the only one in the country named Ponti from my family. There was no one I had to live down. There was no one I was embarrassed about, that I could take ownership of my identity. And it turned out I did win awards that day. And what was funny, I found out later, is that they had already all been engraved. And the principal went and they said, you need to take these back and change them. Because the kid that walked in today, he means it.
Wow.
This is his name. And so I changed my name. And on my own, I didn't check with my mom. I didn't do anything. And that was the first time I think I began to think, you know what? I'm just a kid, but I control part of my destiny.
Nice. Wow.
I love that story. I know we only have a minute left, so I'll just say that my middle school years, all I remember is my face was in a book. So I think my favorite part of those years was reading.
What was the book? This book, Orange Houses by Paul Griffin. Was that the book?
I'm sure it was, because that's how old I am.
These sessions make me feel old, because you and Rachelle probably watched the shows I made at Nickelodeon when you were kids. That's how old I am. I made kids TV when you were still kids. Paul and I are in the same age bracket. So
I have a feeling I'm older than you might think.
Me too. The camera makes me look young.
There we go. It's a good camera. It's a good camera.
This has been a great session. Thank you so much. A great discussion and a very, very enjoyable. If anybody has any final thoughts, and then we will bid everybody goodbye.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So much fun.
And Rachelle, thank you for putting up with me at 2 different panels.
Oh, my pleasure. Do it again.
Some great stories. Thank you. You start reliving your own middle school years.
That's what we do, right?
Right.
You know, I keep yearbooks nearby just in case I need story ideas. You can flip back. The most amazing thing on social media, though, for me, is you come across people from middle school, and their version of you is so different than your version of you, and vice versa. And it's really neat that you can find out, oh, so that's who I was. It's interesting. Yeah. You guys have a good one.
Great. Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank
Call
you
me,
so
James.
much.
Pamela, thanks for the intros.
Yes, thank
It was
you.
great.
Thanks again, Wendy.
Thank you.
Bye, gang.